Alberta Legislature. My name is David Carter, Speaker of the House and MLA for Calgary-Egmont. Early in the proceedings today, a special guest will be introduced in the person of the Consul General of Sweden. Oftentimes, in the course of a month, the Speaker meets with various Consuls General or ambassadors of various countries around the world. These people come as visitors to the province and in the course of their visit meet with the government and sometimes with the opposition. But when they come to the legislature, they come and have a courtesy call and a discussion time with the Speaker of the House, because the Speaker represents all the political parties in the House and all the people of the province. Later today, after question period, in estimates, the House will be dealing with the Department of Tourism.
Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly today a distinguished visitor to our midst. He is the Swedish Consul General located in Vancouver, but responsible for dealing with the province of Alberta. He is accompanied by the Honorary Consul for Sweden here in Edmonton. I would like first of all to ask the Consul General of Sweden, Carl Bertil Eriksson, to rise along with Lars Fahlström and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions.
Edmonton Centre.
Oral notice of a motion under Standing Order 40 to debate at the end of question period the urgency of this being Mental Health Week in Alberta, and I have copies for all members of the Assembly.
No, you don't.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 24, the Hail and Crop Insurance Amendment Act 1988. This being a money bill, Her Honor, the Honourable Lieutenant Governor has been informed of the contents of this bill and recommends the same to the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, this bill allows for the province to advance funds for the payment of indemnities under the Hail and Crop Insurance Act.
The Associate Minister of Agriculture has moved first reading to Bill number 24, Hail and Crop Insurance Amendment Act 1988. Those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 24, Hail and Crop Insurance Amendment Act 1988, introduced by the Honourable Mrs. Cripps, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the Department of Transportation and Utilities for the year 1986-87, plus the annual report of the Alberta Utilities for 1985-86.
Minister.
Introduction of special guests.
The member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce two groups today. One, 15 students in an adult basic upgrading program from the Edmonton Public Schools who are here visiting with us today with their teacher, Walter Killick. There are 15 members in this group, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask that they please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Edmonton Centre, followed by Calgary-Glenmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this being Mental Health Week in Alberta, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce to members of the Assembly, members of a group called the Depressive Disorders Self-Help Group, who meet in my constituency and whom I've spoken to, and I know would like to have other MLAs come and visit to their Thursday evening meetings. Among the group and its members are Sherry Banks, Donna Polk, Lorraine Durham, Charlie Jenkins, and Colleen Banks. I'd ask that all members of the group please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Legislative Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of this Assembly a group of grade 6 students from the Chinook Park Elementary School located in the Glenmore constituency. This is a dual-track school which is both French immersion and English. They're the city champions in a spelling contest. Their school choir sang at the Olympics and have won numerous awards. And they've won tournaments in soccer and volleyball. They're a very active group. And there are 77 of them today. And they're accompanied by teachers Donna Tabor, Diane Fortin, Bill Goliath, Cheryl Blythe, Bob Santos. And would you please rise? They're both in the member and public galleries. Would you please rise and accept the warm greeting from this Assembly?
Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly some 25 scholars from grade 6 in the St. Justin School. They are accompanied today by their teacher, Mr. Frank Omo. Mr. Speaker, I would request the students to rise and to receive the usual cordial welcome of the members of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, many Canadians are concerned about the post-war trend of increasing reliance by governments on taxation of individuals rather than corporations. Mr. Speaker, you won't find a worse example of that trend than the Alberta provincial income tax system. Mr. Speaker, since the Tories came to office in Alberta, corporation income taxes have declined from 7.2% of income to practically nil. On the other hand, individual income taxes have gone from 3.3% of income to 4.1% in 1986, and of course that'd be higher now with the tax gouging of 87, 88. Sorry. My question to the Treasurer: will the Treasurer state, as a matter of provincial government policy, why the tax burden has shifted in this way in Alberta?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I think the reason for the shift in tax revenues is probably accurately depicted by the member's analysis in percentage terms only, but of course that doesn't explain what in fact is the backdrop to the reality of it. Let's remember that in Alberta we've gone through two interesting cycles. The one cycle, which started in 1985-86, showed very depressed revenues coming to the province as a result of reduced oil and gas royalties, and so as a result the pool of dollars obviously shifted, that if you have less dollars involved in your total take from oil and gas royalties and you have a fairly stable dollar amount in terms of other tax forms or tax sources, obviously the tax shift must take place. And that's where that great phrase that statistics don't lie, they simply make liars look good. And in this case what we see is that in terms of the numbers have really been distorted considerably to make whatever arguments you want. The second thing that's happened, Mr. Speaker, is the economic backdrop of those companies, those corporations that are paying tax. Remember as well that in 1985, Mr. Speaker, Alberta collected about 25% of the total tax collected by corporations in Canada. In Canada, 25% was paid here. So obviously we have a massive source of dollars coming to us from the corporation side. But as can be expected, when corporations start to lose money as a result of the decrease in oil and gas revenue, obviously their tax proportion reduces. So you see two phenomena here, Mr. Speaker, and I could give you a fairly good analysis in terms of correlation if you want. What has happened is that the economy is reduced, and therefore corporation tax is reduced substantially. The oil and gas revenue is reduced substantially, and obviously the shift must be transparent in terms of statistics.
Thank you, Honourable.
Mr. Speaker, from the Treasurer, we always get a lot of words, but it never makes much sense. Mr. Speaker, I would point out, going back following his logic from 71.75 to 76.80, it actually went down 7.20 to 4.20. Even during that times of high economic activity, it was going down, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
Now, my question is, all the gobbledygook aside, I want to ask the Treasurer this. Is the Treasurer saying that he agrees with this trend, that corporations pay less and less and individuals pay more and more? Does he agree with it?
Of course not. Mr. Speaker, our policy on tax revenue is exactly what we have stated in this House on subsequent budgets. First of all, Mr. Speaker, to trigger investment in this province, you have to have a tax regime which accepts risk, which accepts investment and provides a climate for investment. Now, that's not known to the socialists across the way. I know that. Mr. Speaker, the second element of our fiscal plan is, of course, to maintain the lowest tax regime for people in this province. And that's why the individual tax system in Alberta is the lowest in Canada. Mr. Speaker, you look at the changes which have taken place in other provinces, you'll find that the personal income tax has increased. I won't even make a casual reference to Manitoba, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, this province has no sales tax. Now, that's not gobbledygook, Mr. Speaker. That's something the people of Alberta understand, and it affects the regressive side of the taxation, and we're committed to maintaining Alberta as the only tax-free province in Canada.
Tax-free!
Is it? Yeah, we're not paying taxes in Alberta. Average people will be interested in that.
Oh, right.
Now, Mr. Speaker, if socialism means tax fairness, so be it. So be it.
That's right.
Now, my question, to make sure that the Treasurer's not being misquoted, if the Treasurer's not being misquoted, is the Treasurer saying to the people of Alberta that he intends to do nothing about this unfairness, that we'll continue with this trend? Is that what he's saying?
Oh, Mr. Speaker, it's very nice to hear the holier-than-thou words from across the way about tax fairness. The only example we have seen in Canada of a tax regime which was confiscatory was the one in Manitoba. And what happened there, Mr. Speaker? I leave you to guess what happened there. That province is essentially bankrupt as a result of the NDP administration. $1 billion in foreign reserve losses, which would cripple most countries, Mr. Speaker. That's the kind of regime he's talking about. Let me come back to what is happening here in Alberta. We know, Mr. Speaker, in Alberta.
Thank you. No? Perhaps we could have the final answer to this question. All right, supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting how they always want to talk about something else rather than the question.
That's right.
My question is, to this Treasurer, knowing that we have one of the most unfair systems in Canada, is the Treasurer not concerned that average citizens pay the bill while corporations spend more time avoiding taxes than they do creating jobs?
Once again, Mr. Speaker, the fallaciousness of that argument is clear to all Albertans. The only way you can generate jobs, Mr. Speaker, is to provide a climate of investment. And this government, since 1971, has done more than any other government in Canada to ensure that happens. Look at the regime, the economic regime of this province, Mr. Speaker. Look at the incentives which we put in place to ensure that private sector risk takers are welcome in this province, and to some extent, Mr. Speaker, a tax regime which is driven by the province's objectives, not the federal government objectives. And that's why new investment is coming to this province every day. I could recite for the member the forestry sector, the oil and gas sector, the strength that is abundant and clear in this province. And that's why we can forecast, Mr. Speaker, that our real economic growth in Alberta will increase somewhere close to 4% in 1988-89, far greater than any other province. And that's because private sector wants to come here where they know they're welcome. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me come back to the question of the relative proportion of revenue coming to this province. Everybody in Alberta will know that if you have a pool of income that has suddenly been reduced by oil and gas reductions and your personal income tax stays the same, obviously the personal income tax is going to increase in proportion. At the same time, I pointed out, Mr. Speaker, that our corporations have suffered losses as well because the oil and gas regime has been very difficult for them. Obviously, the corporate side has gone down, but that stability...
Honourable Treasurer, I would expect you to continue in a moment, but the chair is getting a bit uneasy about the amount of loud heckling that's taking place. Treasurer?
You're right, Mr. Speaker. It's hard for me to reply with all this noise. Let me say again, Mr. Speaker, that when the other two variables suddenly shift downward, and you have a personal income tax which is very high, because, of course, the income per capita in Alberta is very high, obviously those numbers will shift. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that 1988-89, when profitability returns to the oil and gas sector and to the royalties of this province, and when tax payable is starting to be made by the corporations, as we now see happening, those numbers will come back into balance. I can assure the people of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, that the policy of this government is to maintain the lowest personal tax regime in Canada, no sales tax, and to attract investment. And that's what we're doing in this government, Mr. Speaker.
Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Stony Plain.
Mr. Speaker, the Treasurer tells more fairy tales than Mother Goose, but could I ask the Treasurer, Mr. Speaker, how he justifies reducing corporate income taxes, the taxes paid by corporations, when 1986 figures show that over 60% of corporate profits in Alberta were transferred outside this province?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman is wrong on that last point. About 60% of the oil and gas profits are reinvested in this province for that because we have a very good tax regime. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, there's been no corporate reductions, tax reductions over the last 2 years.
Stony Plain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary question to the Provincial Treasurer. Given that last Thursday the Canadian Bond Rating Service recently passed judgment through their rating service on the tax and fiscal policies of 3 Western provinces, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia, would the Provincial Treasurer please comment on Alberta's current rating and relative position?
That's a very good question, Mr. Speaker, and it is, in fact, in the context of the fiscal plan, as I've outlined in this House just a few minutes ago, Mr. Speaker.
Good news.
We took the tough decisions when, in fact, we had to make them, and that's responsible government. Others, including the Socialists from Manitoba, shirked that responsibility, Mr. Speaker, and look at the demise they've let that province right now.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my second question, have the member from Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Agriculture, on Friday we learned that this government's response to the farm debt crisis is a payment deferral plan that will help some farmers a little bit in the short term. Later that same day, Mr. Speaker, we learned that the government's going to give taxpayers money to an big oil project at 5% interest. And I'd like the Minister of Agriculture to answer this question. We see 5% loans to oil companies and 9% loans to farmers. Where's the fairness in that?
You're not 5%. That's not 5%. They return at the end. It's a deferral.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister of Energy to supplement this because, again, as is the tradition in this House, the Honourable Member for Vegreville is being very misleading in his comments. As it relates to the difference, we're very proud of the support we have offered the farming population, acknowledging at the same time, Mr. Speaker, recognizing the difficulties that the farming sector is under. We recognize there's always an opportunity to do more, but we're very thankful that this government has been so forthcoming, recognizing the difficulties our agricultural sector is facing.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to point out that the honourable member is not accurate in stating that it's a 5% loan. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if the prices go up the way they are expected to, then the upside part of the project would result in the overall return being closer to 10%.
Yeah. They just went down last weekend.
That's absurd. Mr. Speaker, farmers have learned not to expect the same treatment that oil companies get from this government.
That's right.
But I'd like to ask the Minister a supplementary, recognizing that nearly 40,000 farmers would benefit from having their government-controlled loans lowered, interest rates lowered. I'd like to ask the Minister why he's not fighting for 6% loans for farmers.
Mr. Speaker, in response to his first statement, the agricultural sector does recognize they are treated differently than the energy sector because they're treated one heck of a lot better. Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member's suggestion as it relates to the altering of our interest rate under the Farm Credit Stability Program or under ADC, the Associate Minister announced a very substantial program as it relates to the deferral of interest as it relates to a commodity indexation, which is going to be of substantial help to a number of our beginning farmers. We are always open to suggestions, and it is something that we will examine in the event that we feel that we do have the funds available to reduce the interest rate under the two major programs that we do lend out as a government. I indicated to the honourable member, though, that in the event that we were to reduce under the Farm Credit Stability Program and ADC to 6% from the 9% level, it would be in the vicinity of $100 million a year. Now again, we find that the honourable members are suggesting ways that we can spend money. The leader of his party criticizes us for the taxation levels, which are the lowest in the country, yet they're advocating higher taxes and spending more money. It's very, very ironical, and it's very self-critical as to what they are advocating, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the half-baked program announced by the Associate Minister helps perhaps 5,000 farmers. I'm talking about something that would help 40,000.
That's right. Get it straight, Peter.
With the stroke of a pen. I'd like to ask the Minister if he's satisfied that the $28 million total cost of the Farm Credit Stability Program through the Treasurer's budget is in his mind, a satisfactory commitment to the farm debt crisis by this government.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen again how quickly the honourable member from Vegreville and the New Democratic Party can flip-flop. On Friday, he was so quick to receive the credit in saying it was his program that we had implemented. And today he's saying it's half-baked. Now, if that isn't an irony, I've never seen it, Mr. Speaker.
Go get him, Derek.
It's tempting, Mr. Speaker. It's tempting. The motion is Motion 227. The first part is the Minister's program. I'm working on the second part now, and and if tradition is the case, they'll turn around. I'd like to direct the last question to the provincial treasurer here and ask him why he is not prepared to recommend 6% interest rates on Farm Credit Stability Plan loans, given the fact that he's only committed $28 million to that total program.
I notice, Mr. Speaker, that the member has made again, a fallacious argument. Let's remember, Mr. Speaker, that this 9% money was taken up by a vast number of farmers, and this certainly assisted them in their financing long-term. No other financial institution in the world would provide that kind of a benefit package to the farming community. We recognize its importance as the first pillar of strength in this province, and we know that this will succeed and tide them through this difficult period. Now, while the $28 million is referred to in the budget, Mr. Speaker, obviously the opportunity saving is much larger. It's probably closer to $70 or $80 million a year on top of the $30 million subsidy, Mr. Speaker, because, of course, the farmers can borrow at 9% fixed from us with an easy repayment schedule, but, of course, an alternative would be to borrow off the market. And with the inflation rates and the Treasury bonds moving up now, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, if you were competing in the private sector, you would find that the fixed costs would be around the 12 or 13%. So we're saving the farmers about 3 to 4% in terms of their fixed costs. That doesn't show up anywhere, Mr. Speaker, because that's part of the plan. That's part of the way in which we're financing it, using our dollars to assist the agriculture community. It's working, Mr. Speaker, and that's where the thorny issue is. It's working, and they don't like it.
Member for Redwater Andrew, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since none of the official opposition are actively involved in farming, to the Minister of Agriculture, could you tell the House how much of the farm income, either in percentage or in dollars, was government programs?
Mr. Speaker, the opposition is making so much noise I couldn't hear the question from the honourable member from Redwater Andrew.
And neither could the chair. Redwater Andrew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the first part of the question was heard well. To the Minister, could the Minister indicate how many dollars, either in dollars or in percentage, of the farm income in 1987 were government incentives or programs?
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the honourable member can appreciate, since he does come from a farming background, it varies with each sector. but as an example, and I'm more than happy to give the honourable member a detailed response, varying with each sector, but as an example, the grain sector, approximately 30 to 35% of their income does come from government support.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, in view of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that the higher the income of the farmer, because he can deduct the interest rate, means the less the effective rate is, will he not consider a sliding scale system so that those farmers that are not earning enough to pay tax would only be paying 6%?
Mr. Speaker, as is the tradition of this party and this government, we're always open to excellent suggestions, and I will note the representation by the honourable member.
The member for Westlock Sturgeon on behalf of the Liberal caucus.
Means the minister didn't understand, so I'll try again. So. No, it's a related issue, Mr. Speaker, and knowing your worry about it being repetitive, this is on the index deferral plan, and I will switch my questions over to the Associate Minister, Mr. Speaker, and the program that she and the Premier announced late last week, to strengthen the farmers' ability to repay the ADC loan because of the low commodity prices. However, Mr. Speaker, the farmers are suffering from more than low commodity prices. They had the double whammy of drought. So in light of the fact that the impending drought will reduce, if not demolish, crop protection, Mr. Speaker, would the minister consider restructuring this plan so it not only takes into consideration product pricing, but takes into consideration the size of the crop?
Production. Mr. Speaker, the member from Westlock Sturgeon raises a question that is of concern to all of us, and that's the possibility of a drought situation in Alberta. But that's another problem, Mr. Speaker, and that will take other considerations. Fortunately, last weekend we had a little bit of rain, and we've got more forecast for this week, and I hope that the members' predictions are all wet.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. That's I'm glad she's quite a Pollyanna and was very interested and optimistic. However, Mr. Speaker, the point is this, that the farmers are not so interested in whether income in case a product drops, Mr. Speaker, but what they would get overall. Will she not, or is the department considering any form of income insurance, a basic income insurance, that takes into consideration, Mr. Speaker, things like the drought, grasshoppers, poor commodity prices, and worst of all, a Tory government?
First of all, it's our re-election.
Certainly, Mr. Speaker, we have a program in place which protects the farmer against crop losses. It's called all-risk crop insurance.
Mr. Speaker, the next supplementary then is what plans does the minister have for those farmers that are not eligible for the index deferral plan?
Mr. Speaker, the index deferral plan certainly is targeted at borrowers from ADC, and that plan, I think, will work very well. The people who borrow from ADC, for the most part, are young beginning farmers, and that's where we detect the most problem and the most hurt, and that's the reason the program's targeted that way.
Mr. Speaker, again to farm income and support and the ADC and the proclivity, Mr. Speaker, to foreclose, could this minister tell the House whether or not they're studying any form of system, or is any studies in place to see how much land that is not mortgaged, not being repossessed, is devalued by the fact that this government so lustily seizes and backs land and then dumps it back on the market? How much is she devaluating the property?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, the supplementary has been asked, and the Chair is concerned because there are at least 8 other people who want to get into question period before 3:20. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the member knows full well we don't dump it back on the market, and that's been a concern that he's raised at an earlier question period. Why don't we? we don't dump the land on the market. We move it out in an orderly manner so as not to depress market prices and so as to be fair to all would-be purchasers.
Thank you. Member for Vegreville, followed by Little Bow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Associate Ministers perhaps had a chance to think about my questions on Friday, and I'd like to ask her if she can assure the House that farmers participating in the payment deferral program will have their payment first applied to the principal outstanding on the loan.
Mr. Speaker, the portion of the index deferral plan that is deferred is actually interest. So the remaining portion of the payment that would be made would, in fact, lower the principal payment, not in proportion to the amount that is due.
Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, would the Minister consider tabling the commodity index formula that will be used for various commodities for review of this legislature?
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly take that question under consideration.
Main question, this is supplementary on the same issue, Cypress Redcliffe.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. I wonder if the Minister can share with the Assembly the guiding principles of the program that was announced on Friday.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be pleased to do that. The index deferral program is a commodity-based payment. The option is available to all ADC direct borrowers. It's based on repayment ability. There is no interest charged on the deferred amount. We may allow deferral equivalent to 2 years retroactive payments based on the commodity index again. And repayment on the deferred amount will be triggered when commodity prices increase. Entry into the program terminates in 1991. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that young farmers will find this program very helpful.
Member for Clover Bar on behalf of the Representative Caucus, followed by the member for Wainwright.
Mr. Speaker, my question is the Minister of Energy. With the announcement of the upgrader, the Husky upgrader in Saskatchewan or in Lloydminster, there seems to be some controversy that Alberta tradesmen may not be getting their share of the construction jobs. And in light of the fact that we do have the expertise in this province, what assurance does the Minister have that Alberta tradesmen will be getting their fair share of the jobs on the Husky upgrader?
Well, Mr. Speaker, certainly the contracting will take place as a result of the operator going out for tenders. However, there was in the 1984 agreement that is being carried over into the new agreement that how, in a general way, the jobs would be shared. And I think the honourable members and the public can be assured that at least half the jobs for the project would be from Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, is the Minister just on a wing and a prayer, or do we have something, a written agreement or some assurance that Albertans will have their fair share of the jobs on the Husky upgrade?
A combination, Mr. Speaker, of the agreement and the fact that there's a tremendous amount of expertise in this province that would be available for that particular job.
Mr. Speaker, I'm asking again, are there any written, guaranteed assurances that Alberta tradesmen will have at least a 50-50 chance of getting those jobs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already answered the question in that there was an agreement in place, 1984, which is being carried over into the new agreement, and it's clear from that and the fact that the expertise is in Alberta that at least half of the manpower on the project will be from Alberta.
Member St. Albert, supplementary.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the jobs that are going to be created by the job itself, there is a lot of fabricating and manufacturing for that facility that should be done in the province of Alberta. Has the Minister, Mr. Speaker, looked and examined all of the fabrication vessel fabrication, tank fabrication, pipe fabrication, and is some of that work going to be done by the manufacturing and fabricating sector here in the province of Alberta?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the project has benefits of some 3,000 man-years of direct employment during the construction period, some 330 permanent jobs related to the upgrader when it's in operation, some 1,500 permanent jobs to be created as related production facilities are development to supply feedstock, some 7,200 indirect jobs across Canada are expected. Mr. Speaker, jobs will be created not only in this province, but they'll be created elsewhere across the country as well. With respect to the breakdown on that, I cannot give that to the members at this time.
Calgary Buffalo, followed by Vermilion Viking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find this to be a scandalously casual approach to a very important issue. I'm wondering whether the minister might tell us specifically what he plans to do to ensure that we get the right of jobs for Alberta tradesmen and don't rely simply on some vague 1984 agreement. Has the minister discussed this with his counterpart in Saskatchewan to ensure the rights of Alberta tradesmen?
Right?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is an agreement in place. And honourable members, as I indicated earlier, if they would listen, can be assured that at least half the jobs for this project will be in this province.
Vermilion Viking.
To the Minister of Transportation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Transportation, a supplemental. There's going to be a tremendous amount of jobs created through transportation and the tonnage of equipment that's going to have to leave central Alberta and head towards that area. Have you given any consideration of speeding up the twinning of Highway 16 in order to effect the amount of tonnage that's going to go out there?
Mr. Speaker, in direct response to the question, we haven't at this particular point in time, but I might add while I'm on my feet that the timing and the completion of Highway 16, both east and west, is on target and on schedule, and if necessary, we'll move.
Thank you. Member for Wainwright, followed by St. Albert, Edmonton Gold Bar, Edmonton, Calgary Glenmore.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. With a lot of discussion today on interest rates and credit being a major input cost to our farming industry, it may be a good time for us to update our $2 billion Farm Credit Stability Program. Could the Minister tell us how many dollars are spent in that program now and how many people are in it?
Mr. Speaker, to date, there's somewhere in the vicinity of 1.5, just slightly in excess of $1.5 billion taken up under this program, with an excess of 15,000 participants who've made application, Mr. Speaker, and just from those figures you can gather that the average loan is somewhere in the vicinity of just slightly in excess of $100,000.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Due to the fact that 83% of the loans have gone to refinancing in this highly successful program, has the minister given any consideration to extending the loan limit in order to get the maximum use of the $2 billion program? That's $2 billion that's available in the program.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member has indicated, to date, approximately 83% has gone for refinancing purposes, and as you will recall, Mr. Speaker, when we originally announced this program, we had indicated our hope that about 75% of it would be used for refinancing. We've more than met our objective on that, and in excess of 70% has gone out for a period of 20 years. This is obviously meeting a need that was in the agricultural community as it related to their refinancing purposes. Since the program does not expire until June of '89, it would be a little premature for us to offer any suggestions as to what might happen in the event that there are funds in excess of the amount that has been taken up. But I will take the honourable member's representations under consideration, as we do acknowledge there is always a need for additional operating capital amongst the farming population.
That's it. Thank you.
Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. Could he share with the House just why 17% of the farmers have not picked up, why the remaining 17% is there? Is there any specific reason?
I'm sorry, 83% has gone for refinancing, 17% have used their funding for new purchases. In other words, they borrowed the money to purchase additional land or additional machinery. I'm not sure if we're answering the honourable member from Westlock Sturgeon or not. I missed the essence of his question.
That's all right. Vegreville. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct a supplementary to the provincial treasurer. I'm wondering if he could stand in his place and tell us what the province is paying for interest on the money borrowed to supply the Farm Credit Stability Plan.
Mr. Speaker, most of the funding which we acquire for this program is funded off the Canadian market or in Canadian dollar equivalents, and therefore, unlike other provinces, we take a position to reduce our foreign exchange exposure, and right now we have very little foreign exchange exposure, but the effective costs of the recent borrowings would be of the order of 9.5% to 10%, someplace of that order.
St. Albert, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions today are to the Minister of Labour. Albertans, Mr. Speaker, are well aware this government and the Minister of Labour conducted an extensive review of Alberta's labour legislation that resulted in Bill 21, the new Employment Standards Code, and Bill 22, the new Labour Relations Code. Mr. Speaker, Alberta taxpayers are also aware that this province spent a significant amount of money in conducting that process, including a paid holiday for our Labour Minister. But now, Mr. Speaker, it appears that the Minister of Labour and the Premier are at odds with respect to the picketing legislation as set out in Section 81 of the new Labour Relations Code. To the Minister of Labour, Mr. Speaker, has this government, or is this government, now in the process of amending the picketing legislation as set out in Section 81 of the new Labour Relations Code?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the member for St. Albert, when I travel at the taxpayer's expense, I don't take a vacation. The question that the honourable member asked was based, I presume, on his usual research sources at the Edmonton Journal, and the reports are inaccurate.
Mr. Speaker, I don't get the Edmonton Journal to do my homework. I am asking a question. Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. Is the Department of Labour currently preparing amendments to Section 81 of the new Labour Relations Code?
Better be. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly the same question as the honourable member just asked, and I'll give him the same answer. The reports in the Edmonton Journal upon which he based his question are inaccurate.
Again, there isn't any answers, Mr. Speaker. Maybe I'll ask the Deputy Premier. Is it the position of the Deputy Premier and this government that Bill 22 will reach royal assent in its present form as it applies to Section 81 with respect to picketing and consumer boycott legislation? Is that your position?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the policy of the government with respect to bringing forward labour legislation as a package has been outlined so many times I don't know what more I can add. The honourable member will attend the forthcoming days in this session. He will see and have a chance to debate and discuss all aspects of that labour legislation.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary to the Deputy Premier. Is it the position of his government that only employees have the right to picket? Are you denying that to the rest of Albertans? Are you going to deny that right? Is that the truth? Is it?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, the bill is there. It's there to be read. It will be debated and discussed in committee. And if we follow traditional parliamentary procedure, any member, including government members, opposition members, third-party members, fourth-party members, can bring amendments in. And the opposition seems to have trouble understanding that, but if they'll just attend in the House, they'll find that that will unfold.
Labour.
Mr. Speaker, if I can supplement the answer of the Deputy Premier. The Honourable Member St Albert obviously hasn't read the appropriate section in Bill 22. His quotation in his question was from Bill 60.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Deputy Premier was mistaken.
Goldbar, followed by Vermilion Viking.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Labour, I'd like to ask the Minister in his travels if he discovered any jurisdiction, anywhere, that prohibited picketing in this fashion, and if so, where?
Mr. Speaker, if the Honourable Member for Goldbar would read the current Labour Relations Act and the Bill 22 provisions, she would find that in actual fact the change in Bill 22 is a relaxation from the existing condition in this province.
Thank you. Vermilion Viking.
Yes,
Vermilion Viking.
To the Attorney General on a supplemental. During the Gaynors dispute, some Albertans were very concerned that there were individuals that may have not been employees of the company that were causing actions around the picket lines that were almost above the law. Could the Attorney General indicate that if, under this new labor code, that people who break the laws around picketing areas will be addressed better in this new legislation?
Mr. Speaker, the bill is not law as yet, and as has already been indicated, there will be opportunities for debating at second reading and in committee. Certainly, it would be the intention of the government when a law has been passed by this legislature to see that it is enforced and obeyed. That is part of the responsibilities not just of the Department of the Attorney General, but of the Solicitor General as well, in terms of seeking out information as to those people who have breached the law, then having brought that to the attention of the Attorney General for consideration. So in many respects, the question of the Honourable Member is hypothetical at this stage, Mr. Speaker, and furthermore, if I may say so, tends to seek a legal opinion, which I'm reluctant to give in the Assembly.
Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Calgary Glenmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. Recently, we heard of a new departure in the construction of an economic trade office in Taiwan, where the Alberta government is giving $250,000 to the Alberta Chamber of Commerce to set it up. It's my understanding that the department will cover the costs of office projects, salaries of a trade officer, a secretary, rent, subsidizing of housing. The Chamber then is going to try to raise additional funds from the private sector. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Minister, is the government's funding of this Taiwan office indicative of the way the province will be funding overseas offices in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce or other bodies?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the procedure that the government has been involved in over the years in supporting offices offshore, I believe the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs may wish to comment. With this particular office, Mr. Speaker, there has been extensive discussions between the Alberta Chamber of Commerce, the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, and the Calgary Chamber of Commerce with respect to trade opportunities that exist for Alberta companies in Taiwan. And we reached a conclusion that it would be advantageous for Alberta companies to have access to that market via an office established there. And so an agreement was reached where the Alberta Chamber would establish that office with financial assistance from the province. Of necessity, there will be ongoing coordination and discussion in terms of the effectiveness of that office, since taxpayers' money is being used to support those activities. And that's why the project is a one-year pilot project.
Yes, I could supplement the answer by answering the question by saying no. It would not be the policy of the government to fund our offices abroad in that manner in other locations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then a supplementary, and the Minister began to answer this, but who will set the objectives of this office and monitor the results? Who will the trade officer be responsible to?
To the Alberta Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, how will this office in Taiwan then alter our relationship with the People's Republic of China, particularly our twin province of Heilongjiang?
Mr. Speaker, we have an excellent relationship with the People's Republic of China, and we expect that relationship to continue. And the fact that the Alberta Chamber recognizes opportunities for trade in Taiwan should not in any way diminish or reduce the effectiveness of our trade ties with the PRC.
Mr. Speaker, is the contract to the Minister dependent on private sector input, which has been mentioned, and if so, at what proportion? Mr. Speaker, I know there are two questions, but I think the Minister can handle that.
Mr. Speaker, it may be helpful for the honourable member to know that the Alberta Chamber has had a very effective presence in Taiwan, and that presence is supported by the chambers nationally. A decision was reached as a result of consultation with the Alberta Chamber of Commerce and other individual chambers that improved effectiveness of accessing business opportunities in Taiwan could be achieved by establishing such an office. And financial support was sought and provided by the province. The individual chambers will be providing significant financial support in order to finance the Alberta portion of the activities required to maintain the offices in Taiwan.
Honourable Member, Calgary Mountain View. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the public dollars that are going into this office, I'd like to ask the Minister if he will be clear about how the office will be monitored and evaluated by the government to ensure that public funds that have been spent on it meet public objectives.
Mr. Speaker, I think that's a similar question to one that was asked earlier, but there will be a continued liaison between the Alberta Chamber of Commerce and the Alberta government, as there is now.
Question period has expired. May we have unanimous consent to conclude this series of questions? Appears to be concluded. Honourable Member Edmonton Centre on request for urgency of debate, understanding Order 40, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to address the urgency of this motion before the members today. Understanding Order 40, which is that the Assembly recognized this week as Mental Health Week in the province, and commend all Albertans who are involved professionally and in various volunteer capacities in the struggle against mental illness. Certainly mental illness, Mr. Speaker, those who are afflicted by chronic mental illness as well as others who are mental distress and mental disorders of other forms, these people are of prime importance to us, and yet we often hear so little and understand even less about the nature of mental illness and mental health. It is urgent that we all become both personally and politically aware of the thorny issues involved in the care and treatment of mental illness and the provision of mental health services. This motion, Mr. Speaker, is intended to bring this to the attention of all members, the urgent need for awareness of the people, the needs, the issues of funding, and the statutes involved. It's also urgent, I think, Mr. Speaker, that we give thanks to those who are already working actively in the area of mental health, and also, if I might say, Mr. Speaker, to give thanks for those who have experienced or are currently experiencing mental illness themselves, that their courage and their persistence for the care they deserve is an example for all of us. I urge all members to support this motion. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There's been a request for unanimous consent under Standing Order 40 that this motion may be presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Proceed, Edmonton Centre. With your question. Call a question. Yeah. Ready for the question on the motion by the honourable member for Edmonton Centre? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carried. Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, before proceeding to Committee of Supply, if I have leave of the House, I would like to indicate the order of business for the balance of this week in order that members may better be able to organize their schedules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, as announced, supply or the estimates for the Department of Tourism are up, and should they be completed, we will then proceed with Recreation and Parks. Tomorrow evening, we will not be sitting this evening, Mr. Speaker, and tomorrow evening, depending upon the activity this afternoon, Recreation and Parks and Solicitor General. On Wednesday afternoon, it is my information that the Department of Education has been designated. On Thursday evening, we will be proceeding with Social Services, and on Friday morning with Transportation and Utilities, and possibly Solicitor General or Recreation and Parks.
Orders of the day.
Committee of Supply.